Hello, everyone. Welcome to this dark and a dialogue introduction. Today, we are going to explore what is high fidelity, actually, how to achieve high fidelity, and more specifically, what is that defines our achievement of high fidelity. Are you ready? Let's start.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome all. So, in this episode, we are going to try to understand if only specs and numbers are sufficient, are enough, or are paramount in describing, in achieving what is called high fidelity. Is that the way to achieve it? Is that the way to measure it? Is that the way to define it? It's a complex topic because it has to be analyzed from different points of view. And I would like to see through these points, discuss with you, try to understand what is taking place, what is missing, if our approach or some people's approach is wrong or not. Different points of view, not only mine. I'm going to cite other references, we could say. Okay, let's start immediately with point number 1, which I call eye-opening HiFi. What do I mean? Very simple. In the last years, mainly on this channel, I have presented some pieces of gear, vintage gear, that just completely revolutioned my hi-fi concept. The last just took place in the last video, the Macintosh MC30. I mean, it clearly wins in all, as I said in that video, against all the other high-tech, latest design coming from renowned audiophile high-end brands. The sound of it is just incredible. I don't want to say any more words. Take a look at the link. Here's a link. You're also going to find all the links in the video description. But simply, I just want to say how incredible was my reaction when I understood, when I perceived the sound, the true sound of that amplifier, when I put the right tubes and everything, compared to these other famous brands. It was just shocking, really shocking is the right word. And this happened also with other amazing pieces of gear. For example, my EMT turntable, which is, I would say, just slightly below, as I said in the review of this, of my Kuzma. Now, maybe the Kuzma offers a little more stability. The arm perhaps seems to be better. It's just easy to fiddle around with also. And the EMT, no. But the quality of that turntable, I don't know, apart from the aesthetics and the feeling, was just incredible. But it had its steady price, I must admit. I had to refurbish it. Even more shocking, I would say, was the Dual, the turntable Dual, the 1019 that I reviewed a few years ago now, which was just a little bit above $200. And the sound, the sonics were just incredible. Just incredible. I mean, you do not believe it if you don't have it here in front of you. So clearly, one starts to demand, well, do we have to really go high end? Are all these specs and numbers of these perfect machines we have now, absolute neutrality, absolute clearness, transparency, are so fundamental? Well, clearly my answer is no. I can say that right from the start, but that's more my opinion. Today, I want to try to bring you in my thoughts and see, we're going to discuss in the comments, what is going on and what can we do about this. Because, yes, maybe high fidelity is something subjective at a certain point, at a certain level, but we also do have some objective aspects, I think, that define something that is faithful to what? To the recording. High fidelity is a high faithfulness to the reproduction, to the recording, thanks to your system, okay? That's high fidelity. So already this type of gear including, I would say, also some cartridges, some very simple cartridges that once again, I must admit, like the Shure vintage models that I have analyzed also in a specific video dedicated to vintage gear to create a system below $1,000, euro, etc. Here is a link. And once again, I didn't try all of them, but I did try a few of those. And with that very low price, they can absolutely compete with those very famous, huge tag priced models we have today. They probably have something a little more. In comparison to the gear we were talking about, cartridges do have a little more. I admit that. Nevertheless, they lack that engagement, that warmth, that quid, that something that just pulls you in the music, which is something typically found, broadly found in the past century when they were doing all those machines that were supposed to last long, they were supposed to deliver well, and not just something that needs to be renewed every year, like an iPhone. It's insane what we're living today. In any case, let's proceed because there's a lot to say. Point number 2. Okay, I want to call this point Nakamichi Philosophy, even though it's not only of Nakamichi. What do I mean? Well, actually, when I presented my review on the ZX9, here is a link, I mentioned that I read a few things on a brochure of Nakamichi, which I want to read to you. Nakamichi is open to any approach that will improve quality, but we will not adopt one that sacrifices sound for specifications. Good specs are not always synonymous of good sound. Oh boy, if they're right. And this is Nakamichi. The music reproduction in cassettes. And I would say also other areas of hi-fi. They did amazing things. A reference. So if a reference says this, clearly you can't just ignore it. And not, as I said in the beginning, not only them are saying this. Specs are not the only thing. It's not a dogma, okay? It's not a religion. It's not something that can only govern this passion we all have, the analysis of the gear to reproduce music. It can't only be that, but we'll get back to that. Let's proceed to our next point. Point number 4, cables. Cables is a perfect example that we are not facing something objective. We cannot reach an agreement. Why? Because too many people are experiencing differences among cables, and too many people are experiencing nothing among cables. So this is not going to be solved. But apart from that, that's less interesting today in this video. What we are focusing on is the aspect that even though we have measurements and specs who are telling certain characteristics of cables should be not important, we could ignore them and at the same time demonstrate that they are more or less all similar, or if they have differences, they're not influencing, it does not have an impact on sound. Our ears of a lot of people say elsewise, say a completely different story. So this, I think, is already a strong point demonstrating that we are missing something, okay, in our approach. But let's proceed. Point number 5. Maybe it's something tangential, but it's important. The digital illusion. That a lot of people, when we talk about digital, it's almost like they put autopilot. It's digital. It's perfect. It's all there. We don't have to bother about anything. It's 1, 0. It comes out as 1, 0. Well, we're forgetting that all digital signals are traveling on an analog format, voltage. And voltage is clearly subject to all the different problems that an analog, again, voltage signal has. So maybe digital in his, we could say, source format is perfect. The inception. But how we handle it is absolutely not perfect. If only we take in consideration the filtering processing, the noise shaping, which is again filtering. I mean, there is so much we have to adjust to deliver digital. So this is just to say, let's exclude that. Let's not take that as a reference, because it's not. There's lots of problems when we want to reproduce digital and record digital, okay? Let's remember that. That's another fundamental little brick in our wall. Let's proceed. So it's time to make a little statement here. Numbers, and I would say measurements in general, tell us about the quantity of something, not the quality. In fact, actually, and this is applicable to anything, any type of science, if we think about it, the measurements, the numbers, math, specs, as I said, indicate quantities, okay? And from those quantities, we can infer quality. In some cases, okay? Not always. What do I mean? Just an example? Well, I don't know. For example, we can measure the frequency response of a machine. If it reaches a certain amount, okay, in the low and in the high, that means we have a good response, that the signal is remaining the same as it should be from the source. Okay, that's useful, clearly, at that point. But it ain't saying, for example, the quality of that signal, because it's not enough to say it's not deviating from what it should be. There's also the quality of that signal, which must be clearly understood, perhaps even measured in a different way. In fact, sometimes we don't even know what to measure and how to measure. An example that I always do in my comments, which maybe never reached a video, is a blood work test that we do. For example, when we want to try to understand what is our problem, if we have an illness, a sickness, some symptoms that we are not feeling good and we don't know what's happening. Well, you have to decide what to look for in your blood test. It's not that once you did a blood sample and throw it in a machine, it's going to tell you everything, what's good and what's bad in that sample. Unfortunately, no, that's not how it works. You have to decide what to look, and at that point, what to measure. Once again, quantities. And you're not going to know. Instead, if there's something other, another value that we still don't understand, perfectly don't know, a marker of some kind, which could tell us much more on our health, and simply was not asked from the computer, from the machine in the test. And we lost that. Very simple. Let's proceed. Point number 7, quality. Let's spend a few words on quality, just to understand better what we mean. Again, here I do some examples sometimes. For example, I say, trying to explain why it's very difficult to determine quality with measurements and specs. For example, how could you ever declare in a scientific manner which chocolate bar or which wine tastes better than another one? You could measure some values and see, for example, how much sugar, how much fat, how much protein, how much other components are present, for example, in chocolate bars and wine, and you can have a good idea of what could be better. But it's not going to be 100% sure. Someone could say, yes, but you're talking about something that regards taste. So how can that be objective? That's true. That's true. But we do have general trends. We do have trends. We do have general trends in beauty. We do have general trends in quality. What do I mean? Very simple. I mean, the majority of people in the world like ice cream instead of hating it. I would say the majority of people, for example, appreciate Marilyn Monroe, then not appreciate her, actually. Or that, for example, most people would say that the literature of Shakespeare or the drawings and sculptures of Michelangelo is art, is something incredible and not something banal and ignorable, negligible. I mean, all these are trends that are present in our society and that come from a common appreciation, a common knowledge, a common trend where the majority of people do have a similar, if not identical, opinion on things. Okay, so it's not just a matter of taste, meaning that we do have a preferred chocolate bar. Usually, not always, but usually. We have a preferred type of wine. Usually, not always. So this means that we can find specific trends in quality. But we don't know yet how to do that. That's one of the problems here. This brings us to our last point. Point number 8. The model is incomplete. These are also words that Fabio Camorani of Audionautis said. He is an audio engineer. He's not just somebody on the street who knows what he is talking about. He has designed equipment, and he is not the only one, actually. What does he mean? That we are lacking parts, aspect of the bigger picture. What we were saying before. We are capable of doing precise measurements and understanding, because that's what we're using these measurements for, what is happening in specific areas, though, of any science, of mathematics, astrophysics, all the way down to more cerebral things like philosophy or the recreation of history, the understanding of history, or more precise things as medicine, for example, even though, as we know, it is not such a precise science as all the others because it is in constant evolution. I'm sure there are rules, laws, and one day we're going to know exactly what's happening in audio. But surely, if we confront with all the other sciences we just mentioned, audio is probably even lower than all those. And it's funny to see how engineers or techs are so sure about their things, and they're sure that we know everything about machines, that we just need a few instruments and we have all the necessary info to know what is going on and if something is good. In fact, there's an anecdote that I said also in another video on cables, which I want to tell you again here. I want to present it again, where I remember reading in this forum, they were discussing about an amplifier, and a tech started to write, can you write here the specs of this amplifier? Okay, a guy wrote them down. Okay. Nah, it's ridiculous. Leave it. I wouldn't buy it. Referring to another guy who was asking. But what do you mean? I mean, did you ever hear that? That amplifier? Oh, no need. I just need to look at the specs. And I understood immediately if it's something good or not. What? Are you joking? If we have that mentality, and I'm sure clearly not all techs and engineers have that, but that's the final paradox of what is happening. How can we say the exaggeration of this trend, which is present, of relying exclusively sometimes on measurements, numbers, specs. In fact, my final line is going to be not only, okay? It can't not be only that. We do need that. It's our base, absolutely. And we will make those measurements and the spectrum of those measurements and numbers better and better through time. But we must also rely, since we don't have all the instruments yet to do this, also rely on ourselves, we could say. I know it's not scientific, on our emotions, on our senses also. If they are telling us that something is going in a different direction, we shouldn't ignore it. Okay, clearly if we are at NASA or in a scientific environment where we need something very precise and clearly measurable, demonstratable, that has to be demonstrated somehow, we can't rely on that. But in certain areas, like for example, testing a wine, testing a car, I would say, testing a record or a piece of audio equipment, I say let's also listen to that other part. Because let's turn back to our MC30. Everything says that this equipment here, that this amplifier is not a good amplifier. It's full of distortion. The other specs of harmonic distortion, the signal to noise ratio. I don't know. There's so many things wrong, under spec, not good, which would suggest that this is a bad amplifier. And I would throw out of the window my AccuFace, my Master Sound, my Heagle, which I already did immediately after I got it, or the Past Labs and all the other things that passed here immediately out the window to exchange it for these two babies. Because what they were capable of giving me, like the Dual, like other simple cartridges, was just incredible, extremely engaging, and just high fidelity. In my opinion, probably. But I'm sure if I put 10 people here, at least the majority, let's say 6 or 7, would agree with me. Okay, guys, I'm sure a lot of people are going to hate me after this video, but I'm interested in your opinion. Try to be objective as possible, even though, as we said in this video itself, it's very hard to be objective when we talk about these things. But let's exchange our point of view and try to understand how to make this thing better. I think it's something useful for everyone. Thank you again for watching, and remember that music is born analog.
Well guys, if you're enjoying my videos and you're enjoying my channel, please consider to subscribe by clicking the black and white logo here below. Also, don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode and you will become a true member of the analog community.